This year, 2022, we have seen over 120 anti-trans bills introduced in state legislatures around the country.
Number 1. The quantity. More than 100 bills have been introduced across 34 states. Number 2. What the bills seek to do. The proposed bills primarily have one of two goals. One is to ban or restrict gender-affirming healthcare for transgender youth. The second is to ban or restrict trans youth from playing on same-gender sports teams that match their gender identities. Number 3. The impact. The Trevor Project, a non-profit focused on LGBTQ suicide prevention that also runs a support hotline, says 94% of LGBTQ youth felt that the political climate negatively impacts their mental health.
From those concerns, the city responded very proactively to say, like, okay, how can we make up for this? What should the city be doing to support trans people? And that's where this resolution started. So the purpose is first to recognize harm and create a response. In the time, it was looking at increasing hate violence, but I want to also give some additional context for what this means today. In this year, 2022, we have seen over 120 anti-trans bills introduced in state legislatures around the country.
There are 3 things to know about the record number of anti-transgender bills proposed across the U.S. Number 1. The quantity. More than 100 bills have been introduced across 34 states. That's an unprecedented number, according to Kate Sossin, who covers LGBTQ+ issues for the 19th News.
This year saw a record number of anti-LGBTQ bills introduced into state legislatures, and particularly anti-trans bills targeting youth.
Number 2. What the bills seek to do. The proposed bills primarily have one of two goals. One is to ban or restrict gender-affirming healthcare for transgender youth.
The medical community has been really firmly established on this for a number of years and knows how to treat transgender people. What we've seen is a real crackdown on those standards of care, and state legislatures who are coming in and saying, we don't agree with the standards that have been developed by science, and we're afraid that parents are actually making children transgender.
Only one bill of this type has become law, so far, in Arkansas. Governor Asa Hutchinson tried to veto the measure in the state legislature, but lawmakers overruled him to enact the nation's first law banning gender-affirming treatment and surgery for transgender youth. The second is to ban or restrict trans youth from playing on same-gender sports teams that match their gender identities. Idaho passed the nation's first law of this type in 2020, but it has yet to be enacted due to pending legal challenges against the law. So far in 2021, 8 states have passed similar sports restrictions. In March, the Associated Press asked 24 sponsors of anti-trans sports legislation across the country if they could name an instance of trans girls competing in female sports. Only a handful could, and it was the same pair of sprinters who competed in Connecticut between 2017 and 2019.
These bills target transgender kids, but an important thing to point out is in a lot of these states, there are not examples of transgender kids, particularly in sports, where we've seen issues arise. So a lot of advocates have argued that they're legislating around hypothetical children that don't exist yet.
Anti-trans laws are also being proposed and enacted in other categories, including restricting the use of restrooms by sex assigned at birth, targeting gender ID requirements, and limiting gender identity curriculums in schools. Number 3. The impact. The Trevor Project, a non-profit focused on LGBTQ suicide prevention that also runs a support hotline, says 94% of LGBTQ youth felt that the political climate negatively impacts their mental health.
The mental health numbers for trans youth, for queer youth, are really staggering, especially in the pandemic.
The Trevor Project survey also found that the COVID-19 pandemic negatively impacted the mental health of 85% of trans youth. And that was on top of the mental health strains transgender youth already faced. 70% of transgender youth reported symptoms of a major depressive disorder. Over half of trans youth surveyed reported considering suicide, and 20% had attempted suicide. According to the report, affirming transgender and non-binary youth by respecting their pronouns and allowing them to change legal documents is associated with lower rates of attempted suicide.
There's one young person that's stuck with me who told me that he didn't want to be trans because this was just too hard. But that is a message that is the starting point for a lot of this legislation, which is like, it is a bad thing if you're trans. We are trying to prevent you from being trans. Like, if you don't have to be trans, we would rather that you weren't. And to send that message to kids, which is that it's preferable if you're not trans. For a kid who's already dealing with, trying to date and feeling awkward in school, has been such a damaging message for these kids. And it's really rocked a lot of them.
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Tim McPhillips.
Hope you liked this video. Thanks for watching.